All right, we are live, and I'm here to interview a Highline Skywalker, a host of the Line to Mastery podcast, a performance coach, and a redefiner of human limitations. Welcome to the Winner Circle, Cam Nelson.
Hey, it's an honor. So happy to be here.
Happy to have you. So, there's a lot of chaos going on globally with the pandemic. And we're not here to talk about that. This is a very uplifting, inspiring, empowering podcast, and I like to try to keep it light. So that's the first question, is a really positive one, and this is: what do you love about your world right now, Cam Nelson?
Man, I just love my world. I love my world involves a lot of strong community and powerful tools for mastering yourself. The biggest tool is the slackline, and the extension of that tool is the highline. So I have the opportunity, very unique opportunity that's available to every able-bodied being, to learn how to walk in the sky. So I've been doing that for 6 years. I started in Flagstaff, Arizona on a 2-inch slack line. And then eventually over the course of about a year, I got introduced to the 1-inch slack line and then the high line. And then 5 years beyond that first part of the journey, I found myself as far south as Brazil to Highline, as far north as Squamish, British Columbia, and so many other states in between here in the North Americas. And then I just have some really incredible people and community in my life. So yeah, my world's beautiful. Like amongst the chaos, there's so much creation and calm as well.
Mm-hmm. So I would like you to kind of explain to the listeners that maybe that are not familiar with what the slack line is or the high line, just like a um, quick intro to what that is.
Yeah, so it's really similar to a tightrope or a high wire, except instead of having this like cable or this rope that you walk on, you have a piece of webbing made out of either nylon or polyester, and it's about 1 inch wide to 2 inches wide and like just a few millimeters thick. So it's a balanced practice, and they're a lot more dynamic than the tightrope or the high wire. You don't need a pole. It's all your body, all your mind. It's a very spiritual activity as well. And the cool thing about highlining is we get to go out into nature and like build these bridges in places that bridges haven't been built before. So it's a very pioneer sport. And most of us are pioneering this airspace that we get to walk in, that we most of the time are the first humans to walk in that space. And yeah, there's a lot of magic that comes with that opportunity.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned it is beneficial spiritually. Can you explain how that is? A lot of people associate spirituality with religion and things like that, but you can experience spirituality in all sorts of mediums, including slacklining. So how do you channel the spiritual side of slacklining?
Yeah, so before I get into the spirit, I want to talk about the mind and the body connection that slacklining offers. So
Yeah.
a lot of people look at slacklining and they think it's all in the core. It's like
Mm-hmm.
all in your belly. You must have a really strong core. And really, while that is necessary, I think it's more 80% mental and about 20% physical. And a combination of this practice for mind and this practice for body, being able to balance both the feminine side of the body and the masculine side of the body, um, allows spirit to really come through. And I've noticed, especially when I'm highlining out in nature, that my soul is elated. My spirit is just so happy to be in that space, because for me, it seems like something my soul chose to do before coming into this body in this life, and it's being fulfilled. So for that regard, it's a very spiritual thing. And this tool, it's one of the closest opportunities I've had to God. It feels like I've sat in reverence. I'm very devoted in my practices every single day. I love to journal. I love to just like connect with my altar and be with the divine. And and being on a highline feels like church.
Hmm. So how you started 6 years ago, like how did this journey begin into just deepening your connection with your mind, your body, your spirit through slacklining? How did you come about this beginning 6 years ago?
Yeah, so growing up, I wrestled a lot, and I also did a lot of powerlifting. So I like those activities where maybe you're training with a few people, but when it comes down to your performance, it's like all based off of you and the work that you put in, the preparation that you put in before getting to whether it was the mat or the weight that you were competing to lift. So I think having that sort of mindset and that calling, naturally, when I got on the slack line for the first time, I gravitated towards it because I tried to stand on this thing that my nervous system just didn't know how to ground into. So it wiggled a bunch underneath me. And this is something that you see with all beginners, because most of us are not trying to walk on something that has the capabilities of movement underneath us. Most of the time we're just walking on a surface that supports us very easily and very naturally. So our nervous systems never need to learn this. And yeah, just to sum that up, I was humbled and I loved the feeling of sucking and just seeing like a little bit, like just a taste of growth within that first session to where I was hooked. And then I would go out a few times per week for about 2 to 3 hours after class. And I would just keep trying and keep trying until about a few months later, I could like finally walk the thing. And yeah, that was the beginning.
And then it transitioned from slacklining in parks and low to the ground to um, up in the sky. How did that translation look, and how do you slackline or highline, I guess, at such a height, like so high off the ground, and keep it safe?
Yeah, so there's a few things there. When I first started to transition, so I started walking on a 2-inch line, and then the transition was into a 1-inch line, and learning the techniques that would allow me to get onto the line and stand up on the line without pushing off the ground, because that's necessary. In highlining, you don't have anything to push off of. All you have is the line and then open space. So the
Mm-hmm.
only thing like separating you from the abyss of space is that 1 inch. So you need to learn how to either like sit on the line and then rotate over your hips and stand up, or there's this move where your foot is at like a 90-degree angle and you're putting like some weight into one hip, and then you'll bring the other leg up onto the line and then stand up from there. So I I had the opportunity to connect with a community of slackliners about 6 months into my journey. So for the first 6 months, I was just doing it by myself. And I had no idea that highlining was a thing. I didn't know that there was a 1 inch type of line. I just thought there was this thing that I was doing. And that was my whole experience of it. So the community is what opened the door for me to get into highlining and the 1 inch and all these techniques and the ways that you can be safe while on a high line. Um, and just to preface, like I love life. I love life so much that I do this thing that seems on the outside really dangerous and really scary and reckless. Yet it's an extension of how much I love life. So when we build our anchors, we end up having so much redundancy. If one part of the system were to fail, you would still have 3 other points of access that kept you safe. If your main line were to fail, you have a backup line attached to the main line. And then you have a harness and a leash. And the leash is about 3.5 to 5 feet long, all depending on how long you tie it. And then it's just following you the whole time that you're walking. So when you fall off the line, you are just hanging suspended from the line from your leash. So it's still really safe, especially when you rig it properly and you're redundant.
And like explain to just the listeners like how high. Like I didn't know highlining existed really until I saw it on your like social media and learned about it through that way. Like, and you are very high off the ground, so just kind of give people a visualization. on where, and they can always go to your Instagram, slackcamnelson, to see what you're doing. But yeah, how high are you off the ground?
Yeah, so the highest I've been is 1,600 feet, and that was on the Chief in Squamish, British Columbia. And then out here in Austin, I think the highest lines we have are like maybe 60 feet.
Mm-hmm.
And then I've spent a lot of time in Moab. I would say that's probably the spot that I've frequented the most, like taken the most trips. And it's anywhere from like 300 to about 600 feet, depending on where you are, maybe a little bit more.
I'm getting like goosebumps just visualizing this in my head. Have you had any like oh shit moments, like where you had some close calls, or you've been doing this pretty safely?
Um, the most oh shit moment I've had was in Squamish. I was walking off the line, and sometimes when you do walk-offs, not everybody does walk-offs. Like sometimes people will like sit down and they get themselves off the line, but I love the feeling of a walk-off because there is a little bit of that element of danger to where you just need to be so present in the moment, so in your flow and not wrapped up in what could happen. Otherwise, that's most likely what you'll end up creating for yourself. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, anyways, I was a little wrapped up and potentially falling and my foot slipped and I just slid down the line and I just barely scraped myself on like the rock wall. So that was the closest oh shit moment I've had. I actually was doing something silly a few months ago underneath the line, trying to get myself back up, a technique that I've never done before. And anyways, it ended up leading to me fracturing these two fingers right here. So the bone is healed now, but like the tendons and the ligaments still need a little bit of time. And that's
Mm-hmm. So what have you learned from like literally stepping into fear over and over again via the slack line, the high line, and how have you taken those lessons learned and applied them to your life?
okay. So two things come to mind. The voice of fear. I've been able to really understand what the voice of fear is, uh, based off of slacklining and highlining, especially highlining. Just getting onto a high line, like your nervous system tends to freak out and puts you in a state of um, like sympathetic stress. So to learn what that feels like and to hear that voice and to be able to honor it and then regulate yourself down into a parasympathetic state where you're like a little bit more relaxed, you're a bit more flowy. Um, that's been really important. And then one of the most key lessons that I've learned, especially on a big high line, and when I was first learning how to walk big high lines, was having this idea that, all right, I'm going to start at the beginning of this anchor, and I see the end of the anchor at 600 feet in front of me. All I need to do is keep walking and keep taking steps. And it doesn't matter how many times I fall, like I'm going to get to the other side. And I would tell myself that story. Like, it doesn't matter. I can be out here for 2 hours if I need to. Um, Ultimately, though, what matters is that I keep taking steps and picking myself back up every single time I fall. If I need to like take a pause for a second and just calm myself down, like that's okay too. That's a part of the process.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but eventually, continually taking steps, I'm going to end up at the other side.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
So how do you finance this career in slacklining? Like, is this your what you do primarily, or like how are you able to make this your reality?
yeah, so that's something that I'm actually in the process of figuring out. Like for a while, I would have like maybe one or two highline trips, and then I was working in the service industry. So like one or two highline trips per year. And now I'm in a
Mm-hmm.
place where I'm coaching and I've been doing performance coaching and that helps. And I think I'm starting to pivot more towards um, being like a redefine your limitations coach, especially
Mm-hmm.
for professional athletes in
Mm-hmm.
regards to when fear arises, like how do you dance with that to achieve states of peak performance?
Mm-hmm.
And
So yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say that's the segue, and I feel it might not necessarily be getting paid for highlining or getting paid for slacklining right now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yet I feel like there's still value and money in the lessons and the alchemization of that
Oh,
as
definitely.
career. Yeah. So that's kind of where I feel I'm headed right now.
So through all the roles you hold, whether that be as a coach, a skyliner, a podcast host, what is the commonality amongst them? What is your common mission that overrides all roles, whether that be you're professional for fun, with all relationships? What is your overarching North Star that guides you on your journey?
Mm, yeah, man. It feels like this idea of redefining your limitations and seeking discomfort and being able to evolve yourself. I feel like that's what I keep coming back to, whether it's with the podcast and like that's the message that I convey, or it's with the coaching or the highlining and even relationships. There's just so many ways in which we can learn and redefine ourselves. And I feel like that's just what I keep coming back to, is kind of like my dharma and my purpose. It doesn't matter what hat I wear. Ultimately, the mission is to redefine your limitations and evolve humanity.
So, as the host of the Line to Mastery podcast, you've released 32 episodes so far. The last one being the evolution of slackline. You gave us a bit of the history of slackline so far, but if people want to learn more, they could go check that out.
Yeah, did you listen to it by chance?
No, not yet.
Okay,
but
cool.
I plan to. Yeah. So, let's get into that. Like I read your post about that. It was your greatest episode you've released so far. You took a lot of time and interviewed different slackliners to compile it. So maybe what's the Coles notes? Give us a little teaser on what the listener could glean from that episode.
Yeah, so I really wanted to make that episode for me. Like, I thought it was cool that it would end up being released and go to the people, but I really just wanted to know where we've come from in regards to this sport. Like, this is something that we're really in the golden era of slacklining and highlining. There's so many new tricks being developed every single month, especially in this aspect of the sport called freestyle highlining, where it's very dynamic. You're bouncing, and in between the bounces, you're able to throw different tricks and different combos. Like, one trick is at the top of the bounce, you like grab the line and then you're hanging, and then at the bottom of the bounce you start to come back up, and then you will bring yourself back up to standing on the line from being in a hanging position. It's like an explosive muscle up that really doesn't require that much power from yourself. It just requires like understanding the technique, and that's called a rocket mount. So that's just one example. There's many that I could go into, but anyways, like, this is the golden age of the sport, and I wanted to like see where we were going to be in 20 years, but I also wanted to like witness where we are right now, and then really get a good understanding of where we've come from. And I found out, at least as far as what we know right now, there were rope walkers dating back as far as like 22,000 years in Greece. And then from there, I think it was probably about 18,000 years later, it started to like really become prominent in Rome. And then there's this town in Russia called Stavka 1, where they ended up setting up like a tightrope that they could walk across to get to the other village when it was really stormy, and they weren't able to because the bridges were broken. And then there's this rich culture in South Korea that has their own form of the sport called joltagi, which has a bunch of performances with musicians, and then seeing how like the Willindas got popular, and Philippe Petit, who was the guy, if you've ever seen Man on a Wire, who set up a cable between the Twin Towers. And I was really inspired by that movie too, because to see his 6-year journey to make that happen, that one moment in time that many considered the artistic crime of the century, took 6 years. And his methods and his systems and his thought process was such a beautiful thing. And I wanted to capture that within a podcast form, and then see like where highlining was birthed from. And that came from Yosemite. And initially people in Yosemite, when they were climbing, they would walk on chains. So they would have these things called slack chains. And then there was this guy that felt like carrying around a chain was too much. And he realized that he had this webbing that they would use for climbing. And then he learned how to create a tensioning system with that and set that up. And that was like the birth of the first slackline. So yeah, this whole episode was really inspired by me just wanting to know where we came from.
So let's talk about that podcast. Why did you decide to create a podcast, and what have you learned from the 32 episodes you produced so far? And where do you envision taking that podcast?
Cool. Good question. So initially it was a shower idea back in April, of last year. I was just like going through this shit with quarantine and COVID, and I had just moved into a new house with people that I didn't really know, and that brought up just like different energies. And then I was working in the restaurant industry. The restaurant that I was working at closed, and then I moved out to Austin to train on it, and then the gym closed too. So these three things that I had, in the form of like career, purpose, and people, and my living situation, all completely changed as the world. And I was like, I don't know what the fuck I'm gonna do with myself. And when I was in the shower, I just got the idea that like, oh, the podcast, yeah, I could do that. So I challenged myself for my first 4 episodes to just be solo casts. So I was sitting in my closet recording myself talking into a mic, feeling so uncomfortable, and just like continually telling myself like, good enough, just focus on good enough. Doesn't need to be perfect. It's never going to be perfect, just good enough. And my first episode was just on why I even decided to make a podcast. So that was the beginning of the podcast. And then I wanted to have this tool for self-transformation, self-mastery for myself and the people that came onto my podcast. And I have so many interesting friends from like the community here in Austin that focuses on total human optimization, to the Fit for Service community, to my slackline community, to Tantra community. And I figured like, why not create this platform? And I also know a bunch of musicians too. So like, why not create this platform where people can share their stories and share their art and their expression and let that ripple out? And I was really inspired by Joe Rogan as well, because he has such a wide variety of guests on his podcast, that I was like, if I just keep doing this, eventually it's going to continue to gain momentum and pick up speed. And I'll just be able to talk to fascinating people and learn more and become a greater version of myself, and in turn, a greater leader for my community. So that's kind of like where I see the podcast going.
Beautiful. Let's get back to fear. And we'll relay this to the podcast. So you've had a calling that you should start a podcast, just like you had a calling that I should continue with the slacklining. And you listened to that call, and you moved forth with that, on that path of must. So many people on their journeys, they feel those callings. I should move cities, or I should change jobs, or I should start a podcast, or I should start a book, or I should do et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they don't, because that voice in their head holds them back. And that voice in their head is there to keep them safe, to keep them in their known worlds, where at least, even if that known world is terrible, at least they know what terrible is going to look like today and tomorrow and the day after. What advice would you give your clients based on what you've learned from your podcast through slacklining to stepping into fear? How would you advise a hero on their journey, stuck in that path, stuck in that at that crossroads of should and must, and the should is keeping them fixed, paralyzed?
Yeah. Take some deep breaths, calm your nervous system down, and then take that first step. Because that first step is always the most difficult one. If you take that first one, dude, you win right there. That's a win. You sent it. And then from there, it's just continually taking steps. And sometimes it looks better than others, but that fear is the voice of resistance. And I've come to find that resistance is actually the North Star, the guiding light for where you should be going. in your system. You can honor that it's just trying to keep you safe. Yet these dreams that you have also have you, and it just takes you being willing to dive into the unknown and take that first step for things to continue to unfold. And
Mm-hmm.
have these dreams, like you're so supported within them. Like the universe has got your back. The universe wants to see you succeed and do so well. Like it loves you unconditionally. A lot of us just have this idea that it doesn't. And I think that kind of plays into religion and this whole idea of like heaven and hell. And um, if you don't show up in a certain sort of way over the course of your lifetime, then you're going to go to hell. Yeah, I think
Mm-hmm.
the scriptures have a little bit of wrong. Yeah, just the perspective for me that resonates the most is heaven and hell is here. It's an internal space that you create for yourself. It's not something ethereal that goes beyond this lifetime. It is this lifetime.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And it's with that awareness, we begin rewriting our programming, our past beliefs, and just repetitions of reminding ourselves that heaven and hell is here now. What are some other programmings that you had to rewrite or you are in the process of rewriting?
Mm. Yeah. I would say one of the biggest ones right now that I've been working with is just what it means to be a man. And growing up, I saw from my dad that when things got tough, you were supposed to escape into substances outside of yourself um,
Mm-hmm.
when things were difficult. So what I'm reprogramming myself with is that king archetype of not looking away when things get difficult, like being present with it, not escaping into alcohol or pornography or booze, or alcohol and booze are the same thing. Marijuana, just there's so many things that we can distract ourselves with from our lives. So that's what I've been really honing in on and becoming devoted to.
Mm-hmm. So, on your path, you've met many mentors and helpers along the way that have helped you get to where you are. So, let's take a moment to acknowledge some of these mentors and helpers that have helped you attain the space that you are in now and the man you are now. And what were your key takeaways and lessons that you learned from them that you've applied into your being?
Yeah. I would say one of the biggest ones is authenticity and speaking your truth and what's real for you, even if it's difficult. That's not something that I really learned as a kid. I learned that it was easier to just say that you're good,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to being like, I feel a little messed up today, and it's probably because I haven't been able to convey what's heavy on my heart. And now I feel the opportunity to do so. Um, so seeing other men do that has given me permission to do the same. And then in turn, that's rippling out into my clients and the other people that I'm connected with.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Any other mentors and helpers that have played a notable role in your journey?
You want specific mentors?
Yeah, if you could
Uh,
think of any, if there's any to acknowledge.
yeah, I think one of the biggest ones, man, is Eric Godsey. Just the way that he shows up on his podcast and the way he's able to articulate himself and convey what's real for him. Like I was having a not necessarily a dark time, but I was like just having to show up for some work that I wasn't really passionate about to
Mm-hmm.
sustain the dream. And
Mm-hmm.
about 3 or 4 years ago, during that time, when I was like showing up for that work, I was working at a river outfitter, just grinding ammo cans,
Yeah.
grinding the rust off of them, having to wear a mask, only listen to podcasts, and I listen to Eric all the time. Eric got me through it. So
Uh-huh.
yeah, Eric's a big one. And then there's a bunch of people within the slacklining community that have inspired me and served as mentors. And I've like learned from their style. And yeah, I would say some of my mentors now are those that are really embracing the divine masculine and showing up and embodying that.
Yeah, and I want to get into that divine masculine and divine feminine shortly, but there's something you spoke of that I'm really curious. So let's play with time. Let's rewind and we're going to be in the past. And I want you to put yourself in that place where you were grinding those cans, doing something you didn't want to be doing, but you had to help, like in hopes that your dream would manifest in the future. You said Eric helped you through it. What would Cam Nelson of today say to that old Cam Nelson, that Cam Nelson of the past in that situation, or just another hero in a similar circumstance, working a job in a situation they don't want to be, with hopes that this is going to get them to the future? How would you advise that person?
You will come to appreciate the magic of the mundane.
Could you elaborate on that? Because someone in the shit right now, that might not be enough to help them. Like when you were grinding those cans, and if that's all Eric told you, I don't know if that would have fueled you.
Yeah, I think me having the purview that I have now allows me to understand the potency of that message.
Yeah.
Yet me not having that purview at that time, I would elaborate by saying, you will never be in this moment ever again. You only have this one moment, even if it feels uncomfortable and mundane. Your dreams are so much closer than you could possibly imagine. And it just requires you to keep going. And you will come to find, once you reach your dreams, because you will, and this experience right here, the mundane, the chop wood, carry water, is exactly where you're meant to be, and you won't be here forever. So enjoy it best you can. Find joy in this moment, even if you feel like it's shit. You can honor that this feels kind of shitty, and I'm still going to find joy.
Yeah, that's so well said. So yeah, let's get back into the divine masculine, the divine feminine. It's come up a few times in this conversation. It's something you've been exploring as of late, and the last few years, I think, from what I've heard. What have you learned about the divine masculine and the divine feminine, for someone that is not familiar with those terms and what those terms mean? And this is particularly of relevance. I feel, as a man, it's great to get your perspective on this. There are a lot of females out there talking about this, less men.
Yeah, cool. Well, it's an honor to be one of the men talking about this. I have this really unique opportunity right now to be in Fit for Service. And the course material we're going over is, the first trimester is the divine feminine. The second trimester that we're just stepping into, that started today, is the divine masculine. And then the third trimester is the unification of the two. And for me, the feminine is a lot of flow, a lot of trust, a lot of surrender, a lot of faith. And I had the opportunity to really practice my divine feminine within the feminine trimester, because at the time I didn't have the funds to support Fit for Service. So I had to reach out to members of the community that I've known and crowdfund and surrender that I didn't know how I was going to make it work out, but it was so in alignment that it didn't matter how it happened. So that's the divine feminine. And a divine masculine is like this powerhouse of support and stability and a little bit of routine and presence and holding space. And for the feminine to do what the feminine wants to do, which is flow and surrender and be with nature and in communion with the world, and the energies of it, the feminine needs to feel supported by the masculine. And if we take a step back from this idea of relationships where like the man is the masculine, the female is the feminine, or sometimes like those roles switch and we just look at the individual, we all have the masculine within us and the feminine within us. And being able to blend those two allows you to be in alignment with yourself and clear. And then so that relationship with yourself, with your own feminine and your own masculine, and how you can hold space for both, becomes a greater extension of the relationship that you're able to have with someone that has a stronger feminine or has a stronger masculine. Yet it always starts with you.
So the next semester, you're learning on how to bring the two together within oneself. You haven't got there yet, but from your learnings and understanding, what do you think that process looks like?
Balance. Yeah, I feel like I have this very unique perspective because so much of slacklining and highlining is being able to balance the left side and the right side of the body, so the feminine and the masculine. Um, and and while there's still so much more to learn, I feel like this has been the tool for unification for me.
Mm-hmm. So as you coach other people, you're mentioning you're wanting to coach other athletes and other performers, maybe not in slacklining, but in other fields. How would you, so let's use me for an example. I'm a jujitsu practitioner. How would you, what lessons from slacklining do you think would benefit a jujitsu practitioner? And just explain how that looks. And I know this, the same lessons that would apply for a jujitsu person could apply for a hockey player, or just simply a human being. But yeah, how would you advise jujitsu player with some lessons or some tips that you've learned as a slackliner that you could apply to jujitsu? And I know you can apply it to anything, but go for that.
Yeah, okay, cool. So what comes up for me, and we'll start with slacklining and then we can translate it into jujitsu, is
Yeah.
like balance isn't about always standing upright um and not faltering. Balance is more of like how you can catch yourself in the moment that you feel like you're about to fall. So how you can course correct. And so that's something that I really learned in slacklining. And now with jiu-jitsu, you may find yourself in a armbar that you just started to escape, and then all of a sudden somebody repositions their leg and now you find yourself in a triangle choke. So how are you able to course correct and pivot in in that position so that you don't end up getting submitted or having your arm snap or being choked out? Um, and and I think that's what it's all about. It's not about not getting into a compromising position. It's about how you get out of the compromising position and how you can stay calm and centered in the moment that you may be in a triangle choke so that you can
Mm-hmm.
escape that position.
Mm-hmm. No, that's great. That's perfect. So that's how you apply the slacklining lessons to an athlete. Now let's apply it to a everyday person living life. And you could use an example of client that you've worked with, a success story of a lesson you've taught one of your clients from slacklining and how they implemented that into their life.
Yeah. So the cool thing is like a few of my clients have actually taught slacklining and I've taught highlining.
Yeah.
So it's become really applicable, and they've seen from the sport that it's just like this beautiful representation of life, where there's going to be moments where you have fear, and it's a matter of like, how do you listen to that fear, and then where do you decide to move from the fear? There are going to be moments where you fall. How do you pick yourself back up in those moments that you fall? There's going to be moments where you find yourself off balance or in a compromising position, like we just talked about in jiu-jitsu. How do you create inner stillness so that you can maneuver through that space and either not fall off the line or find yourself choked out? And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the biggest thing for just having normal clients that might not be doing athletic pursuits, is like, where can you witness and observe fear or some sort of anxiety arise? And then from there, what story do you choose to create with it? Is it one where you're a victim due to your situation? Or is it one of empowerment because your situation is calling you to rise and do something
Mm-hmm.
different?
Mm-hmm. So on one's journey, there's many highs and lows, and you've talked about a few of your challenges so far, like your primary means of income ending because of COVID, with the restaurant you worked at closing, having to move to a new city, having a clash of personalities in your new space. that you lived in, the gym that you're training at, that you moved here to train to Austin to train to closing. Those are a few of the challenges. But through all your life experience thus far, what would you say has been the biggest challenges you overcame, and how did you do so, and what did you learn in that process?
Man, there's quite a few for sure. Um, all right. Without getting into a lot of the details, I think
Mm-hmm.
one of the most challenging moments that I've experienced was um, with my past partner. So I haven't been in a relationship in like 3.5 years because I've still been
Mm-hmm.
processing a lot of this previous relationship. But there were ways in which this partner really needed me to show up. And she was in Arizona and I was in California, and I was in a scarcity mindset of like, at the time, I had what felt like two options: stay in California and continue to pursue my dreams and travel and train, or come back to Arizona, be with my partner at the time, and show up for her in one of her most difficult moments. And I chose myself, and I chose not to show up. And and then I ended up sexually engaging with someone else that was not my partner, and that totally ripped my partner apart and just like broke all forms of trust within our relationship. And to ultimately, I know that happened for both of us, and we both really needed that experience because now she's in a beautiful relationship with a man that like knows how to support her and show up for her. And if it wasn't for that experience, I don't know if I would feel as called to show up in the ways that I do and actually be present and be aware, and knowing what it looks like to not show up, and now knowing what it looks like to show up. Um, and and I would say what like really got me through that was just being able to have time and space and realize through introspection and reflection that that's not who I want to be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. I really appreciate your vulnerability and your authenticity with that share. So to close the episode, I asked all guests the final three questions, and we got into that point. And the first one is the big one. If that one isn't not a big enough one, enough. Um, so the first question: through all the highs and lows, that is life, that is this journey, that is this path. What has been the greatest life lesson that you've learned so far that you feel called to share right now?
Hmm. You know, man, growing up, I felt like I was going to live an epic life, and I didn't know what that was going to look like. And now that I have this tool of slacklining and highlining within my life, um, I understand a bit more of like what that felt like, what was calling me to this epic life. And at the time that I was starting this sport, I didn't have my balance was shit. My balance was awful. It took me a while to even start to feel comfortable on the line. And when I communicate with others about this sport, the first thing that most of them say is that my balance is awful. And the greatest lesson that I've gotten from this sport is that you can always redefine your limitations. You can always um, flip the script and change and create a new story for yourself. Like maybe it'll take a little bit of unlearning. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's a beautiful thing to know how to work with your system and peel back some of the old programs and instill yourself with ones that serve you. So yeah, one of the biggest lessons that I've taken from this sport and just life in general is that you are capable, you are powerful, and you are the one that writes your script.
Mm-hmm. And like you mentioned earlier, it starts with that first step. It doesn't have to be a big one.
Yeah, and sometimes that first step is just awareness that like, oh, I'm in a place that I don't really like being. I don't want to continue to be here. I'm not sure how to get out, yet I'm aware that this is not it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right. The next question. In 3 words or less, how would you describe the experience you're having on this earth, Cam?
Expansive, limitless, legendary.
Beautiful choices.
Thank
We
you.
played around with time. We rewound into the past. Now I'm going to fast forward us into the future. We're going to fast forward us into the future alongside an 85-year-old Cameron Nelson. I want you to picture in your mind's eye and in your heart who this 85-year-old Cam Nelson is. Where are you? Who are the people you are surrounded by? And what is the impact that you have left on your time in this reality?
I am healthy. I'm able-bodied. I'm still vibrant and full of vitality. The people around me are high performers, those that I love, leaders that have done the work and showed up for their lives and the planet. We're still highlining, of course, and the impact that we've been able, and I have been able to make on the planet is rewriting the script and showing humanity what is possible. When you redefine your limitations and you choose that as your way of life over the course of your whole lifetime, not just in your 20s or in your 30s, or maybe in your 40s before that midlife crisis, or in your 50s when you're like, well, I'm still alive enough to do something now. No, every stage of your life is an opportunity for you to learn something new, to continue to grow, to expand, to be served, and also to serve. So yeah, I see this moment in time in my life as just the beginning of the beginning, and I'm here for the ride and the journey of the souls.
Let's stay with that 85-year-old for one moment longer. So you're atop of a mountain, you're feeling the breeze, your air, you're surrounded by a community, you're healthy, you're vibrant, you're full of vitality. You have left an impact of helping others defy human limitations. We're not going to stay in the future. We're going to bring us back to the now, the infinite now, which is ever present and always. What does that 85-year-old Cam send to the current day Cam? What message does he send you?
He says, just keep going. Chop wood, carry water. Just keep going.
Aho. Well, it's been a pleasure to have you on, to connect with you more, Cam. For anyone listening that are wanting to learn more about you, your podcast, your slacklining, your coaching, where can they connect with you?
Yeah, so mainly Instagram right now. I'm the most active on there, at slackcamnelson. And then if you want to listen to the podcast, it's on all major directories, just the line to mastery. And yeah, there's a few things that I have in the works right now. As far as coaching goes, if you're an athlete looking to achieve peak performance, redefine your limitations, and learn to dance with the voice of fear, then I have a program coming out in about a month that I've been working on. And yeah, I think out of all the projects, I think that's what I feel called to promote right now. And yeah, expect big things.
Right on, brother. So to close every episode, we bring our fist in and we connect for a digital fist bump. Boom.
Yeah, brother.
The winner circle is a choice. We can all choose to be a winner. And that starts with a step forward, a yes to that must. And with that, it's a wrap.
Yeah, thank you, bro.
Thank you, Ken.